So I'm really excited to have Gail Irvin with me today, who works with a number of our association partners and has been an executive director and worked with membership organizations for quite a while and has lots of experience. And also Colleen Bagnasco, who oversees our area that manages meetings, events, sales, and other off-site kinds of programs and activities. So thank you both for being here. We're going to jump right in and talk a little bit about unexpected things that can happen that can impact the governance and leadership of your organization. So as we all know, we have boards. Boards have a number of members, and some of them serve in key leadership roles. I know, Gail, that your organization that you're the executive director for went through something really difficult and unexpected this past year. I wondered if you could share a little bit with us of what happened and then how you really navigated those waters.
I lost my president unexpectedly a month and a half after she was inducted as a president. She suffered, unfortunately, a major health crisis, and of course, we were prepared in some ways and not prepared in others. Our policies, for sure, had something of that, of what would happen when someone was to pass away, what the next succession was going to be. What we didn't plan for was the human part, the grieving, the unexpectedness, getting the board notified, and also what you do after that. And I also think the biggest challenge for us was the communication. We didn't know how we were going to communicate this, considering she just got, put into place. We were lucky that we had a very strong relationship with her current employer, who's a big supporter of our organization, and they have a very robust communication department. So we worked in tandem with them, but still we were kind of grappling, and imagine trying to put together communication about someone that just passed, that is very near and dear to you, who's supposed to start their presidency, and all of a sudden this is changing. And then also there's a component to it. Our bylaws did not explicitly say how long someone would serve as the president to fill in. So we had to ask our president to serve for 2 years. We could have done the alternative and just had her step in and just had another election. But my board felt that it was important to keep this particular president in place for 2 years so we could have the continuity and sort of get us through this grieving process.
Wow.
A couple things I didn't expect is how much it would have impacted me. I had a lot of guilt through it because I had to still carry on the business of the organization, but also I put my grieving aside, and there was just, you don't plan for that, and everything was happening so quickly that I'll say, Steve, you had given me some advice that I didn't take. I had to go to a couple of meetings where I was supposed to be with her, and it was super challenging. My leaders could not be with me, so that was really hard for me. And also just helping the board go, manage through this was really challenging.
Yeah, and I know from having watched you go through that process a bit that there's different stages to that grief and that everybody experiences them differently. And one of the things I thought was really well thought out and very thoughtful was when it came time for your annual conference later in the year, that your team had put together some ways to honor the memory of the president who had died. And even though it had been many months, it was really, really powerful and really important. Do you want to talk a little bit about a couple of the things that you did in that situation?
Yeah, we have a distinguished service award that typically goes to somebody in our field that has obviously demonstrated the core tenets of that we believe in. It also has donated a lot of time to ARN, and the board decided to give it to our president had passed away. But in addition, we invited the family to come, which was super powerful. They were still grieving, so it was, and they needed that closure for us, and we needed that closure with them, as well as her own organization, as I mentioned before, has been tightly woven into our organization. It was a really awesome way to celebrate her life and give her an award and have all these important people part of that closure for her as well, and for us, and also being able to demonstrate, just even though she didn't get to serve her time as president, all the things that she had done for us to help us get us where we are today.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And most of us don't like to think about a situation like that, but they do happen, and you have to think on your feet and also take care of each other. So thanks for that insight. So other things that can happen unexpectedly, I think, often occur when we're at our conferences and offsite. And I have noticed that a lot of the boards that we're working with now are anticipating more as volunteers, and maybe even have concerns about what could happen at an event. And perhaps just with increased violence in the world and just concerns in general about how people are going to react to different situations. There's just more, I think, concern and questions about that. So, Colleen, I know your team works with staff and with volunteer leaders around how to be prepared when you're offsite at a conference. What are some of the things that you're having to spend some more time thinking about and preparing people for as they plan for conferences and programs like that?
Yeah, I think right now, particularly, it's the political and social unrest that we're seeing, not only across the country, but globally right now. So we're seeing protests and strikes at the destination where events are being held, not only with AMC clients, but we're seeing it with other associations as well. So it's really having that open conversation, and having a pulse on what is happening, not only during the period of time of your event, but before your event, during and after. So what other groups, what other events are taking place in the destination, that would have an impact on the health, the safety, and security of your attendees. So staff should be on top of that. There should be a crisis management plan in effect, or a contingency plan in place, and it's really keeping the board apprised of what is happening in the community and providing that communication to attendees and to staff. So and I would say not only within the destination are we seeing the political and social unrest, but we're also seeing some conflict within volunteers, within board members, that also can have an impact on an event. So I think it goes back to, if you see something, say something, talk to your CEO, bring it forth so you can have a conversation and prepare what that means, what that looks like. Do you need to hire extra security at an event? Is your code of conduct up to date? So just taking a more, holistic look. We've seen, again, not with our events, but I know of other associations where there's been active shooters, right, in the community where an event has taken place. And you can have a great contingency, but you can't plan for everything. So again, it goes back to the communication, talking with the venue, with law enforcement, making sure that there is a plan in place and you are making that decision, and working with a communication tree. How is the decision going to be made, whether to move forward with an event, whether to cancel it, whether to postpone, and getting that information out.
That's great. And I think you're right. Even when you make decisions about a destination or select a city and convention center, it may have been 3 or 4 or 5 years in advance. And so sometimes circumstances change in that particular region or state, whether it's a weather event or political strife or a social justice issue. So I think that having ongoing conversations about those things, and being open to talking about that, and listening and learning and identifying what else can be done when you're in the cities that you're scheduled to be in, if there are those uncomfortable occurrences, and being proactive when you can be, is good. So I do see some really good conversations and questions that are coming up from boards earlier, and not just in reaction to something that it might be a weather event, but actually anticipating again, how people may be showing up at a meeting and what their concerns and questions are. So also, I think some of our groups have maybe done some redundancy kinds of planning. So they're maybe capturing some of the content before they go to the meeting. So they're maybe pre-recording some sessions just in case. And they can use those for other products or purposes if they don't need them to replace something that's happening on site. So just different types of things to think about as we plan. Would be interested in hearing from each of you if you have any suggestions for people that are serving on boards now or about to serve on a board, regarding sort of what to anticipate and how to plan and be ready for unexpected circumstances or situations. And anything that you've seen somebody do well, or just advice from a leader to leader that you would offer?
I can start. I think you need to make sure your bylaws and your policies are pretty tight. We were lucky, especially in my circumstances, with the sudden death of a president. What we didn't have was the subsequent years. So how long would this president step in to be the president-elect step in? Also, I would say it's a horrible thing to think about, but having a really solid communication plan and making sure you're hitting every outlet. I think we stumbled a little bit because we didn't know. Thankfully we had a partner in it, but I think those two things are really important. Again, it's not a great thing to talk about, but at least have these plans in place. And I think especially with, like you're saying, Colleen, the unrest that's out there. I mean, I can even speak to what we've done for our own conference. We were in a state that wasn't great. And so my board didn't particularly care for their policies and their politics. And so we are putting things in place. I would advise execs to make sure that you have some sort of plan in place and what your policy is for going to these states that don't align with your mission or vision. I think that's a healthy conversation to have at the board level.
Yeah,
Great,
I
thanks.
agree. I think that is critical. And I think it's important for boards to build in time for a broader discussion on risk management and safety and security. So you want to ensure that your organization has a crisis management plan in place, so that you're safeguarding not only your staff, but your attendees and really the reputation of the organization. So those conversations, I've heard from some associations, and I'm surprised that they're just not even having those conversations, but it really is critical.